class. Today we're going to go over the very basics of InDesign, and we will open up InDesign and you'll see this screen in which you can open up recent documents or start a new document. We will open a letter size document that's a normal sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11. So today I'm going to go over the basics of just putting text and images on the page, which will be enough to get you started and hopefully make you curious enough to explore some of the more in-depth features that InDesign has to offer. So first I'll show you under File the document setup. This allows you to set your document up in terms of the number of pages. We'll make that 4. Facing pages here allows you to view the document on screen as if it's a book, so show you how the book layout of it will be. You can adjust the size again, and you can also adjust the size of your margins. We'll leave that at 1/2 inch for now. Okay. And if you want to change some of those attributes in the middle of working, that's okay. You can go to Layout up here and go to Pages and add a page or insert pages. You can go to Margins and Columns and change the size of those margins. You always have to have a little bit of a margin because when printers run paper through, they have to grab the paper and they can't print at the area that they're grabbing. So it's always good to have a little bit of space on the side. So like I said, 1/2 inch is fine. Here you can also add columns and then adjust the gutter, which is the space in between the column. Okay, so just for fun, we'll say 2 columns. Over here on the side, under pages, you can see what I was talking about with the facing pages. You can see they put them next to each other. So the first tool you should know over here in the tool area on the side is the selection tool. This is just used for moving elements on the page around. The next tool to get to know is the text tool or the type tool. If you click it, you can draw a box in which to put text. After putting text in, you can also use this tool to go in and select that text after making the box. So if I select the text and then go over here to Properties, a lot of this, what you see here, will probably be familiar from just using a word processor like Google Docs or Microsoft Word or Pages. You can choose your font. And then each font has different attributes within it. So we'll go to light. And you can change the size of the font, which also you'll probably be familiar from word processing. And also under appearance here, you can change the color. So let's say we wanted to make it yellow, and then stroke, and we'll give it a small black outline, and you can change the number of points that outline is. So as you can see, it gets wider. And then there's also some other attributes that are more unique to InDesign. For instance, you can change the leading, which is the space in between lines. You can change the kerning, which is the space in between letters, the horizontal scale, the vertical scale. So you have a little bit more controls over what the text looks like. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool and see you can change the size of the box with the selection tool now that we have it on the page. So another thing I'm going to show you about the text tool is more related to whole paragraphs of text. So I make a text box, and now I'm just going to paste in some text. So as you can see, the amount of text I have is longer than the size of the box. I mean, one thing I can do is take the selection tool and change the size of the box. But say it keeps going off the column. When the text goes past the size of a text box, you'll see right here a little red box with a cross in it appears. If you select that, you can make a new text box with the rest of the text. And these two different text boxes actually work in tandem together so that you can still edit a single body of text. It's a really helpful thing. So I'm going to select all and then change some of my attributes here. We'll just pick a font. Maybe change the size of the font. And as you can see, even though it's two different text boxes, you can use them in concert with one another. And my guides here for my gutter allow for me to sort of snap them into place so that I know they're lined up correctly. And I can actually turn that off by going to grids and guides under view and unchecking snap to guides, and that gives me a little more room to play around with it. So there we go. But I'm going to turn that back on. So next thing I'll do is show you how to make a shape. So under here, there's the rectangle tool. With a lot of the tools in InDesign, if you click and hold down, it'll give you a number of related tools. So you can make a rectangle or an ellipse or a polygon. We'll make a rectangle. And so you draw it the same way you sort of drew a text box. And under properties on the side, you can see you have sort of similar appearance features, the fill and stroke, as you do when we were editing the text. Okay. So you can take your selection tool, move it around. I'm going to move it to another page. Take your selection tool. You can make it any size you want. Similarly, there's a line tool where you can make lines. If you hold down Shift, it will stay within 45-degree increments. And take your selection tool to move it around. And so sometimes lines are helpful for just delineating space on your page, moving things around, or like making space in between objects. So next, I'm going to show you how to insert an image. And things do get a little trickier here because there's a lot of different features you can do with images. So we'll go up to File and then go to Place, which is Command D. I'm going to go to my desktop and I have this image. I'm going to open it. As you can see, my cursor has a little preview of the image and I can just plop it down. Now, the funny thing about images in InDesign is that your selection tool doesn't actually edit the image itself. It edits the box that your image is in. So I didn't mean to actually crop the doggy here. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo to go back to my original size. But I do want to scale it down so that it fits into the bounds of my margins. So I have a tool over here called the Scale tool. The Scale tool here. It has a few other movement tools under transform tools. Like this is also where you would rotate the image. But let's go to scale. And if you can see here, there's a tiny little target. So when you scale it, it's going to scale around the point of that target. Putting it in the top left is kind of the easiest. So I'm going to put it right there in the top left. I'm going to grab the other corner, and I'm going to hold down Shift to keep it in proportion, and scale it to the size of my margin. If I don't hold down Shift, it's going to scale the dog into all different directions. And I'm going to hit Command Z to prevent that from happening. So if I go to the selection tool, you can also see that when selecting the box, this circle in the middle comes up, and so that allows me to edit the image bounds without editing the bounds of the image, if that makes sense, without the bounds of the object. The image treats the image and the object separately, and I'll show you where that will come in handy in a moment. But for now, it's just a little annoying if you accidentally do it. So be mindful of that circle in the middle when you are selecting your image. Okay. So let's say I place an image, but I accidentally have something else selected. So I'm going to select this yellow box we made earlier, and I'm going to place that dog image again. So Command D, place. Notice it's selected, and I found the I sniffed a flounder image, and you can see it pastes it into that object. This is annoying when you do it accidentally. It's helpful when you want to try to make objects the same size. So you've already placed an image, you can copy it and then place another image into it, and then suddenly the two images are the same size. So that's very helpful. But this is such a common mistake that people make that if you hit Command Z, which is undo, it gives you that image on your cursor again and allows you to place it as you normally would. A note about images as well, and this is a note about digital images in general, not just in InDesign. One thing you want to avoid is making images bigger, because the bigger you make an image, the smaller its resolution becomes. That's because the actual pixels of the image get spread out. So if I were to make this image larger, it would lose detail when I go to print the image. Making it smaller doesn't lose any resolution. So that's totally fine. But that's just something to keep in mind. So if I were to make this image quite larger, you can see its pixels start to become more visible. So it sort of becomes chunky, as people sometimes call it. So I'm going to hit delete and delete that image. Now on the side of file management, you can see the I sniffed a flounder image is sort of hovering over here in my desktop. How InDesign works under the hood is it writes a script that tells the computer what to display in front of you. So it's telling the computer, for me to see this right here, to read an image on my desktop. So if this image were to get thrown away, for instance, notice down here there's an error. And if we go click on that error, it'll say a link is missing, meaning it's linked to this image and now it can't find it. So you have to make sure you don't edit images that it's trying to read. So I'm going to go into my trash. I'm going to move this back to the desktop, and that should rectify this error. Oh, it's checking, no errors. Perfect. And so it's good to keep track of this little light down here at the bottom to see if errors are coming in, because if you're doing a lot of file management and you're moving files around, it can become problematic. So now let's say I edit the image. Okay, we have a color image now. Let's just say I open this with Photoshop, and I'm not going to go in depth onto Photoshop here, but say I were to make the image grayscale. I'm going to discard the color information. So I'm making a change to the image. Save. It's checking for errors down here. Oh, there is an error. It knows the image was changed. Links, modify link, I sniff to flounder. And so it's telling me this is the image that has been changed. So one thing I can do is I can select that image and I can go to place, select my image that I changed again, and it places right into the old image, and now there's no errors at the bottom. So this is where that selecting an image or selecting an object and then placing into it actually comes in handy. Another thing to know is, let's go back to that feature in which I change the bounds of the box independently of the image itself. So I did that thing where I grabbed the circle in the middle, and so the image comes with this extra space around it. Where that is helpful is if I go back to my first page and I want the text to wrap around the image. If I select the image, I have these options for text wrap. So I'm going to say text around the image. So having a little bit of space around the image itself via the bounding box is helpful for sort of visually putting together how much space, because if it's all the way up to the side of the image, the text will come all the way up to the side of the image, and that doesn't look super great. So there's different options for text wraps. There's wrapping around an object if this were to, for instance, be an oval. There's wrapping around the bounding box, which is what I chose. There's jumping the object where there's no text on either side, just over on top of it. And then no text under it either. So I think the most useful way of doing this is text around the bounding box and then editing the bounding box independently of the image. I think that's kind of the most useful way to do it. Okay? One thing I'm noticing here is that if I zoom in with Command plus sign, my text is not lined up on my two columns. One thing you can do here is put your cursor over the ruler at the top and click and pull it down, and then you get a guide. So guides don't print on the page. They are just helpful for lining things up, and they also allow for snapping, as I showed before. So the text boxes will actually snap to them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a guide. And yeah, these guides are helpful in all sorts of ways. And then I'm going to use it to line up the two columns of text. So now it's looking a little cleaner now that it's lined up. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you is how to export this to a PDF. So we're going to go to File and then Export. We'll name the file. We'll just go to My Creative Cloud files is fine. And we'll name it test PDF, whatever you want to name it. It gives us different options. You can make it into a JPEG image. You can make it into an interactive PDF. That means that it has video elements and hot links in it. Most likely you're going to want it to be a PDF for being printed out. So I'm going to hit save, but then a lot more options come up. So you can choose to only export certain pages. We didn't put anything on our final page, so I'm going to put 1 to 3. So we'll just export the first, second, and third pages. If you know a little bit more about images and how they get compressed, you can go under compression. If you're sort of well versed in the language of pixels per inch, you can adjust that here. This helps if you don't want your PDF to be a gigantic file. It can sort of cut the images off at 300 dpi, which is perfectly fine for printing, and it will give you a smaller file. And those are kind of the sort of the basic parameters. And then you hit export. Now you'll see it says there is overset text on page 1. What that means is that if you see, I have one of these little red boxes saying that my text went over. And so that's just InDesign's way of making sure you don't mind that all of your text isn't showing up. So if that's totally fine, you can disregard that that little message, or you can kind of fix it. You can go in and fix it. There we go. And then start the exporting process over again. Going to title it test PDF. Hit save. And I'll hit the range 1 to 3 and then export. And if I go to my iCloud drive, or excuse me, if I go to my Creative Cloud drive, there it is, test PDF. Looks beautiful. So there's my 3 pages that I exported. So these are the very, very basics of InDesign. I hope this gets you started, and as always, if you have more questions, you can email me at dfloyd@saic.edu. Thank you very much for watching.